Today I'm very honored to be able to introduce our guest today, Major Julianna Rodriguez. In case you have any doubts, here she is. Major Rodriguez has a long career in both service and education. She received her bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the West Point. Later, she also studied computer engineering at Columbia University, receiving her master's degree. She also successfully completed a number of military training courses in areas as broad as ranging from artillery to airborne education. And she is currently with the U.S. Army Cyber Command at Fort Gordon. Major Rodriguez also is very much involved with some of our programs here at Augusta University, and she is among one of the leaders of our wonderful program, Girls Who Code. And we hope that our relationship and collaboration with Julianna continues for a long time. And so now I yield the podium to our guest lecturer.
Okay. Hi, so I think I've talked to a number of y'all. How many Augusta University students do we have? Okay. Awesome, most of you all. How many of you all are affiliated with the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences? Okay, so most all of the same group. And Augusta Tech students? Awesome, welcome. And community members or folks who work here? Okay, so hopefully there will be a little bit for everyone in what I'm going to share. It's very much based in how I approached life and leadership and work. One of the things that really impacted me growing up were movies or any kind of media where you had a person in a situation where they didn't know what they could contribute, what they could do, probably because, you know, we have movies such as Galaxy Quest where they're not even in the right frame of technology there. You have movies such as Big where you have a swap and then the person doesn't know what they're doing in that job. Or you even just have movies such as Office Space where the managers don't really know what's going on and just kind of manage people because they interact well with people. And I always watched those and to me it felt like a challenge, like, hey, if I'm going to be doing anything, let me make it worthwhile. So I'm not just there, I'm not just kind of floating along, managing things, but I'm actually contributing usefully to whatever project, community, or initiative that it is I'm working on. One of the things that then stuck with me was being able to go back and look at some wisdom from, in this case, 1955. So C. Northcote Parkinson, he was a British naval historian and also an army officer for Britain for a while, not Navy. But he came up with this idea. It was published in The Economist. It was kind of satirical, but the idea was that if you have 60 minutes for a talk, it's going to take the entire 60 minutes. So let's see if I don't do that. And then if you have 60 minutes for a meeting, same thing. If you have a set budget for something, it's going to take up that amount of money. Any resource that you have, if you've allocated it, then generally a lot of projects, initiatives will take that entire amount of resources. So that's also, I felt, important. But it goes along with what really convicted me from Parkinson, which was the law of triviality. So this was in his 1957 book on leadership, 10 essays, so to speak, that kind of like go through and give examples of why certain things don't work so well, maybe, in a pretty humorous way, and you can find it, even the full text online. Has anybody heard of PLOT, Parkinson's Law of Triviality? Okay. So you can read it up there and change time to also resource, right? Any resource, the resource spent on any item will be in inverse proportion to its value to the overall sum. So the example he gave is of a nuclear power plant and a funding committee reviewing the plans for a nuclear power plant. Nuclear power plants are easy or hard to figure out if they're developed correctly and planned correctly? Probably hard, right? So he gave an example of 10 folks on the board, of which 2 actually knew what should be in the blueprints and what warranted whatever cost expenditures, and the rest of the 8 did not. One of them says, hey, we needed more time, and didn't recommend going forward, but then ceded the floor to the other who actually knew anything about this, who said, I have nothing to say, because he knew that it would take too long to go through all of the considerations that everyone needed to know to make a smart decision on that subject. So that took about 5 minutes of the board time. The next 55 minutes or however long that they spent in that meeting is now spent on, oh, by the way, we also want to build a bike shed for the workers who will be coming to the power plant, and what color are we going to paint that bike shed? And now everybody else who had nothing to say about the nuclear power plant is going to say, hey, I know about paint. I know about small little structures. I painted my room the other day. So let me speak up and get my contribution to this committee put in the notes for the meeting, and I'll have made my mark and I'll have contributed. So that's Parkinson's law of triviality. This showed up most notably 20 years ago. It's hard to think how long ago that was when it didn't feel that long ago. I graduated in high school in 1999. But in 1999, FreeBSD, a free open source software community, was having a question on sleep. So sleep is, how long do you wait in a piece of software before it'll go on to the next command? And initially, they hadn't had it set up to accept anything other than whole numbers or integers as input to the sleep function. So then a junior member of the community suggested, hey, let's have it accept fractional numbers, float numbers, so that it will be in line with where a lot of the other communities are going, and it'll meet those other specifications as well. But then this proposal got met with a backlash of counter proposals, criticisms, just all sorts of, probably not to the point of vitriol, but just a lot of people thinking, hey, no, I have something to say about that, and I don't agree for these reasons, and then they would write out a whole bunch of information about why they didn't agree. But how important was that? Not very important. So Paul Hunig-Kemp, part of that project, wrote an email talking about how he was just very disappointed with the way that community had gone. This was all discussions over an email mailing list. So he identified this as bike shedding. He shared Parkinson's law of triviality, and he said, this is not helpful. This does not move us forward as a community when we spend this much time talking about something that is really a trivial aspect. And if somebody else wants to do it and you haven't done it already, maybe you should just step aside and let that person contribute. Don't take it personally, and don't look at it as a knock on what you have or have not done to date. Just let them do what they would like to do to make the whole project better. So they came up with this 20-year-old graphic, put it on t-shirts, and it became kind of a thing. So if you've ever heard bike shedding, that's where it comes from. Also, in the email, he pointed out 3 types of things he wished would give people pause before they moved forward with sending an email. So the first one, you can read through it. I'll give you a moment. So this is still true today. Not so much in the case of having to pay to download it, because our bandwidth is generally more or less unlimited, for now, at least. But what's really important to this, yes, if you don't have something important to contribute, there's still a lot of business, whether it's academic or more work-oriented business, that happens through email chains. And if you're going to send back something to a very large distro, is that something that will benefit all of the members involved? Sometimes it will. Sometimes you can say, hey, they can just set up email filters. But you want to consider, I would encourage you to consider, is this going to actually have value, you know, even if they filter it or not, for the folks who receive it. The next two get into more personality sorts of things. So the dean mentioned that I help with Girls Who Code, and one of the things that I love about Girls Who Code is the principles. So we give the girls 4 from the national organization and 1 we added. The first 4 are bravery, resilience, creativity, and purpose, and then we also add in respect, because we as a group of facilitators thought that was a very important thing, particularly after we had a Christmas time meeting in which we all brought food for the girls to enjoy, and then they left a mess and they did not respect the space, right? So we added in respect, but it's more than just respecting spaces, right? In this case, he was pointing out that if you are joining a community, if you're joining a project, if you're joining a work team, and they already have a pretty substantial amount of work done and knowledge posted somewhere that you can look up a lot of answers to your questions, if you don't spend at least some time trying to look up those answers yourself, you're doing a disservice to the community. You're being disrespectful of the time of others, because everyone has access to those knowledge resources, and you do too, right? So why are you going to ask someone else to, what's the term? Let me Google that for you, so to speak. LMGTFY. So if you ever see that, that's let me Google that for you, right? If you can look something up yourself, it is to your benefit to do that, because you're probably going to learn more if you yourself find the answer also, which means then you know that and you can help others. But if you're just constantly relying on someone else to help you find every single answer, you're probably not going to know how they arrived at some of those answers, so you can't reference that again in the future, so you might have to ask them the same question twice. And you're also probably just not going to be able to be as effective in contributing to the community. You might even be taking someone else away from contributing to the community, right? So this kind of gets to the aspect of respect. And then the last one is also gets into kind of some other personality things. You can set your own personality is what I'm saying with this. This is getting into possibly emotion, right? All caps. And as he states out, incoherent, badly thought out, or emotional responses are probably not that helpful to what you're working on. And we're all human, and oftentimes if we get really invested into working on something, we can also get really wound up when somebody says something that's contrary to what we thought was true, what we think is true, what we think is worthwhile, and we might be inclined to respond in a way that's less than civil. Right? And here, civility, I'm going to define it, it's not being nice. Niceness is not the goal for the sake of niceness. Civility is the goal because it's effective. Because if you can write out a reasoned response to something that you're pretty sure is incorrect or the wrong, like for whatever reason, the wrong way to go, and you write out a civil response to that, now the person can separate themselves from emotion who receives it, they're more likely to be able to, I mean, we're all human as well, and actually get to what it is you're bringing up, the whole point. Not the emotion couched around that point, but the point itself. And now you can actually have discourse about that point and the differences of views. And it might be that the differences of views amounts to a bike shed, and just pick one and move forward together. Okay, so all 4 of these squares on this chart can apply to any one of us at any time. I'm not going to exclude myself from the top of the chart. The bottom of the chart is where we want to be and where we want to encourage and help others be, especially if you have an opportunity to take a leadership role, whether officially or unofficially. So on the left side, we have interest, engagement, and respect, and I'm going to put them all together. So interest is, hey, this is an exciting thing to work on. I really want to work on this. Engagement is, I'm going to spend the time to work on this. I'm going to look up what I need to. I'm going to gain skills I maybe didn't have before. And respect is, whatever you're getting involved in, I don't think is totally wrong. Everybody else is totally wrong. They don't know what they're talking about, and I know it all, right? The opposite of that, like that you approach it in a way that you can allow weight to everything that you're reading up on it, that you learn about it, and folks you discuss this with. And the top is technical ability. So I'm going to put this in terms of more of a computer science cyber perspective, but really this probably applies to a lot more fields than just that. So on the low interest, engagement, and respect side and low technical ability, you can have folks who are insecure, because it may be for whatever reason that they're getting involved in a field, but they don't really have much interest. They're not trying to learn a lot about it. They don't spend any time outside of what they're forced to do. If you're a teacher, maybe some of your folks in your class could fit this. They have to take a class, and maybe they're not that interested in it, and they don't know that much about it. So that can lead to insecurity. In a workplace perspective, if you have someone who's here, that also might cause them to lash out more at others because of that insecurity. So we don't want to, as leaders, help let people stay there. We'd want to give them opportunities to move out of this square. I have ostrich on there also because it's possible that you have someone who fits in this square who basically has their head in the sand. They don't realize how much they don't know. They don't realize how much they could be learning or they should be learning. They're just not that aware, and they're not trying to become aware. And those folks too, if there's something that they're not aware of, they're not trying to become aware, if there's ways that you can help them move out of that as well, that's what I would challenge, is really helpful. Certainly if you've ever been in the square but not intentionally, and someone helped point something out to you that moved you out of this square, then you're grateful to them, and you're a better person because of that. Okay, so high technical ability. We'll say the low side is less on the interest and engagement. It could be in a particular specialty. Let's say you have a brilliant coder for some things, but other aspects of a new field in there or a new specialization, maybe they're not quite as deep in, but they have also a very high ego and a low respect for the opinions of others. So if this happens in computer science or cyber, then what you get is someone who is both going to burn bridges, probably make other people feel bad or try to, and it kind of also would stem from just them feeling that they are such a gift. Maybe that's how they might view themselves. This is not helpful, right? If you can move someone who's here to the lower half of that side, then they're going to be able to give back so much, and they're going to feel better, but they might not know that they have that vision that they could even do that, right? But if they now have a high amount of respect as well, and then they start engaging others with that same level of respect, someone who has a high technical ability is probably an amazing, effective team member. And that's really what you want to look for if you're building a team. You want to look for those folks who can contribute a lot, and they're open to helping others respectfully, and others who are respectful of their time as well, and then you can really perform. Also really helpful to a team, but not necessarily high technical ability. I'm going to give an example of the movie Rudy. The example of Rudy, right? So he was never going to be a pro football player. He did not have the physical ability. Even if he put all the hours in, he engaged at a very high level. He had a lot of interest, and he respected his teammates a lot. But what that did do was that really motivated everybody else on his team. So if you have someone who's engaging, who doesn't try and say they know more than they do and act insecurely, but they're really contributing everything they can, and they just have a great attitude, they're probably going to be effective on your team as well, as long as they're not disrespecting time. So that element comes into there too. But if you know anybody, if you find yourself on the top in a particular situation, let's say you can have been really effective, so I'll use the little green pointer here, you can have been in that bottom right square, really effective, But now time has passed, and especially in technology, right, that just moves so quick. So if you're not always learning, you're probably, what you knew is going to become less and less relevant as time moves on. There have been many cases of folks who have been in that bottom right square in open source communities who then move to the top right square because, just like the sleep example for FreeBSD, they start to feel like their self is involved with whatever this issue might come up. So if you can, again, separate self from the work, that's going to help folks actually be in the bottom part of these squares. So that's the goal. All right, being older here, also the screen beans, I love screen beans and use them in my graduate school slides. The questions you want to ask yourself if you're looking at what you can contribute to and whether it's worth your time, right? Do you have enough interest in this? And these are questions you can share with others if they ask you for advice on how to consider working in what job they should pick or what class they should pick. So do you have an interest in that thing? Is there a need for what you're going to do? With this one, I'm going to go back to my Columbia engineering days. So the Columbia Engineering College was this 12-story building right next to the Columbia Computer Science building, which was a one-story building. They were adjacent. And what I noticed, because I was computer engineering, so I had to go to the 12th floor of one building and the first floor of another building, and I actually was the computer science graduate student rep because my program spanned both of those departments, and they're physically separate, but they at least supported each other. I didn't see a lot of flyers in whether it was on boards or inside of the elevators that talked about needing electrical engineering students. We definitely need electrical engineering majors, right? But what I did see was a ton of flyers asking for computer scientists to help out because right next to our two buildings was the Columbia Business School. So all these MBA students going to the Columbia Business School had these great ideas. Oh, I can do this and this and this and create this app and create this web page and this will have this great impact on this market, but they couldn't code it themselves. So if you're in this field, if you're studying more, if you can get other people interested in this field, it's a high need. There were always flyers asking for computer science students or anyone who could code to be able to make something for a business student. All right, scope. This one is very much tied to interest. If I'm interested in something, but I'm not interested enough for the scope of what that work would take, either to learn something, maybe to get a particular degree, maybe to embark on learning a new coding language. Maybe that's beyond the scope of what I actually am interested in, right? So this is just something that if you figure that out, it's better if you find something that fits all of these and you get yeses for all of these instead of yeses for some of them, and then it starts to become grading, and then you might actually end up in that top left square where you don't know a lot about what it is that you got yourself into and you're not really interested in spending the time to learn more. All right, impact. So sometimes we have these grandiose ideas and we think they'll have huge impact, and we're a little unrealistic about that sometimes. So this is realistic impact, so add that in front of here. What is the possible realistic impact? Maybe do a range, like the high and the low impact. Am I going to be okay if this has the low end of that realistic impact? If I spend all this time working on whatever I'm working on, and it's low on the low end of that scale, is this still okay? Am I still interested? Am I still willing to take on the scope of what is required to do this effectively? And then ability to learn. When I was a platoon leader in Korea, I had a fire control soldier who said he was interested, always showed a lot of positive attitude, but just never certified for basic gunnery tables for the Patriot missile system to be in the engagement control station. And it was just tough. It was like, does it not fit with the way he thinks? Does it not fit with, how is it? And that also encouraged me to want to learn how to teach better. But it's also something that then I realized, maybe this is just not, it could be that he, for whatever reason, doesn't have a great ability to learn this material. I personally believe everyone has a lot of value, and it's not that a person has less value ever if they can't learn a particular thing. Maybe there's just something that fits with them, who they are, what they're interested in, all of those other questions, and then that contributes also to an ability to learn in that subject, in that field. Okay, so me personally, taking all these things into account, some things that I've found help to guide what I'm going to work on. I'm going to put the words up here, and you can consider them in your own terms, like what you've done in these same sort of word fields, and then I'll also share what some of my experience in that. So volunteering, if you're a member of any sort of church group, or even just a member of an organization that needs a lot of volunteers to run, like Girls Who Code or anything, right? Volunteering is something that enables you to get in, to get involved, and if there is a need for that volunteering, that you feel a lot of benefit back from being needed. So for me personally with volunteering, my example for this is that when I was going to Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City, they needed ushers. And I didn't care so much about where I was going to serve, I cared more about their need. So I did ushering. So now it always bothers me if I come into an auditorium and I want to sit towards the end of an aisle, but I'll try and force myself to sit towards the middle because I was always asking people, okay, can you move it in? Can you move it in? Volunteering, what ended up being really rewarding about that, so then I moved out of the city after I was done with grad school and started working at West Point, but then I had this community of folks who knew me, who cared about me, and I would come back and I would help volunteer with them. We were doing something that needed to be done. And then I even got an opportunity to help lead them. When the lead usher left, she had asked me, hey, can you step up and fill this need? And it was really rewarding. So volunteering is a way, if you see a need, if you can help fill that need, if you have interest, if the scope fits, you have the ability to do that thing, that's something I recommend doing. Organize. So beyond just volunteering, if you don't see a need that a community has being met, can you organize something to fill that need? So here my example is, when I was at West Point in the electrical engineering computer science department, we used to have tailgates. I don't know who ran all of them before I was there, but then they weren't going to have them, I think, 1 or 2 of the years. No, we have to have them. So then it became my job to help organize that to happen. In addition, I was also just, when you get to like January, February of a school year, everybody gets back to school and it's, okay, you gotta get back to work, and oftentimes you're hitting project courses really hard, and it's really nice if you have an opportunity to do something fun outside of that. So then I was trying to see, hey, can we set up like a ski day, because West Point had a ski slope, and even though we didn't make it kind of an official thing, we agreed to like put out, hey, if we all show up then on this day, like these hours, we'll ski with each other, or snowboard with each other, and that was a fun event. And it met a need that the community had for those type of events, and had I not organized it, at least 3 of them wouldn't have happened. So you can impact folks in a big way if you look for opportunities to organize. Start. So I'm going to use Girls Who Code. I wanted to just volunteer, right? I just wanted to be a part of an existing Girls Who Code club, but when I looked in 2015, 2016, there were none within an hour of the CSR, well, at least Augusta. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I can drive over an hour away regularly. That's too much. I can't do it. And that's beyond the scope of what I'm willing to help in this field. But it bothered me because we do tend to see an underrepresentation of women in computer science, electrical engineering, cyber in general. So I still wanted to find opportunities for that. So then I was able to kind of ask a question, which I look young, so they thought I was asking, hey, can I be part of an organization that will help me? When I was really trying to ask, how do we give back? How do we get more women to feel accepted and like they have a future in this field? Joanne Sexton was able to identify that's really what I was asking, and came up to me after that AFCEA panel, and then put me in touch with Karen Ribble, and we were able to get this opportunity started for the Augusta community. So look for opportunities. If something doesn't exist and you know it would be great, can you start it? All right, create. So there's a lot of copying. I know teaching, we had seen a couple mindsets that were trying to help us at least identify where students come from sometimes when they feel like it's okay if they copy. That's not really particularly beneficial, right? As a teacher, we know it's not beneficial to their learning if a student just straight copies something. As a coder, you know that if you straight copy someone else's code, that you're not learning the code, and your script kiddiness is probably frownable, and you don't really probably understand the code that you copied. Can you create? So my example for this one is that in the US Army Cyber School, when I got there, our commandant was saying, it's like building a plane in flight. So great, we didn't have enough content, period. And we were trying to find ways to get content, and it was regularly under the expectations of most of our students. And if we found a way that we could actually have them contribute and know what they could contribute to, then I saw this not just a benefit to getting the cyber school off the ground, but also in the future. So what we were able to set up was an opportunity, we created an opportunity not just for us to create, but for everybody in the Army cyber workforce to create. They can get the accounts, they can pull down the public data for the courses, and then they can, commits welcome, right? They can push a commit that suggests a change, either an addition of new content or a change to existing content. But we have a way now that everybody in the community can create and contribute. All right, document. So this one gets more to bravery, right? So one of our Girls Who Code Club principles here. Bravery is necessary if you are going to put down on paper what other people are only willing to say. And this can get to if you have a contentious issue and everybody kind of agrees it's a contentious issue, they enjoy debating about it, maybe they don't enjoy debating about it, but nothing's ever put on paper and signed. If you can document something, even if you're you didn't fully get the issue down, you didn't fully understand all of the aspects of the issue, but you've now put a mark on a wall of a standard that you suggest or that you can get your boss to suggest and push up, then this is something that at least gives you and the rest of the community some firm footing to now figure out what right looks like. Or maybe that is right in itself, and enables you to get pretty far. So I would encourage you, in my current work role, there's a lot of understanding of things and maybe email chains, but even email chains are limited distribution. So if you can put documents together, those can be a firm foundation from which there is not misunderstanding, at least to what was written, right? Interpretation is a separate thing, but if there's a firm understanding that allows a community to move forward, whether towards or against what you put down, but it's a stepping stone forward. And finally, publish. So this is a great academic one. If you have the ability to get what you're working on, not just documented internally, right, but externally get that word out about what you're working on, maybe you can attract other people into what you're doing. Maybe you can at least get some recognition that then allows your research group or your company to get a little more credit, to have a little more respect in a larger community than just internally. Okay, so with all of these is find, is there a need? And all of those questions apply before as to whether or not can you do this, but then a challenge that I constantly give myself. Hey, if I see a need, right? Like if you're at home with your family and you see something that needs cleaning, are you going to clean it, or are you just going to tell someone else that they need to clean it? Right? That's kind of a difficult one sometimes. There's a lot more politics involved with that internal to a family. But when you find a need, can you step up to fill that need? And that's what I would challenge you all to look at with things that bother you, that don't exist, that maybe aren't going in a direction that you know that you could contribute to, is to step up. Okay. So these are my recommendations to myself, and then also to share with you all. Very first one. Am I thinking that I know the right answer on something, somebody else doesn't have something to contribute, and I don't need to listen to what they're saying, right? Can I check my ego so that I am able to consider my ideas, my viewpoints, my facts on the same level as what someone else has? Maybe if I put them on the table and take a step back after hearing someone and listening to them, maybe I realize that I want to pick back up from the table a different set of ideas than what I previously had. But I can't make that progress if I can't first disassociate myself from being these ideas or this knowledge of facts. And that can sometimes be very hard for folks, right? Because you get very wound up into what your beliefs are. Certainly with our political system, that's very much an internal internalization of people's ideas and thoughts. And that hurts us all, because then we can't have those discussions where we equally value all of the opinions until we can find reasons that we will take our certain opinions as what we are carrying. Do. So I have a slightly negative one here. I tried to make most of these positive focus instead of a list of don'ts. But this one specifically, if I have a great idea and I don't document it, I don't share it, I don't act on it, I don't pull together data that I need to for it, I don't sit down and code this feature that I know is needed, I just talk about it, then I'm not helping anybody. I'm not helping myself, and I'm not helping a community. But oftentimes people will get drawn into this sense where they can't actually do something. They're instead going to talk about how great an idea is. Sometimes that's okay. If you talk about it first to get an idea of, is the scope of what I'm going to set out to do worth the effort, right? Then that's fine. But if you're only ever talking, so if you're in a work community and they've been talking for 2 years about putting standard operating procedures out, maybe now is the time that you suggest here, sit down, write them out, write out what you know, get feedback, and then push up. We suggest you adopt these standard operating procedures. So there's a lot of folks, I think, they get caught up in always trying to figure out if the idea is good enough. But I would encourage you not to do that. And as I said, these are all things that I consider myself. I've already talked about this one, but respect is so important. One of the things I heard, I think in the last week, from a coworker was that if you're successful by yourself, are you really successful? I mean, even if you consider, let's say, I think it's a Drake song where he says nobody else helped him, he just made it on his own. I would argue that's not true, because that song itself was a collaboration too. If you don't show respect to others, you can't partner. It's going to take away opportunities for you to partner on things where you need their support, where you need to work with other folks. So if you can approach everybody as valuable, and you can also see any of the ideas they say as not, hey, this person is bad or good, but hey, this idea or this action is, awesome, or maybe could use a little help. Tweaking, maybe they don't have a piece of information I have that I could share with them. It's going to really positively impact any team that you work on, and especially as a leader, if you can share that mindset. Okay, going into that, right? When appropriate is the key here, because if you have someone, especially if they don't know a lot about a particular topic, but now they feel unsupported, and maybe they need to, they could be even in a leadership position, right? If you find that you have something to share with someone and now is not a good time, they're a little too emotionally wound up about it, whatever the case may be, or they need to move out. A good example for just a software community is, hey, we're almost out to release. So now is not a good time to suggest, hey, there's this fault in the way that you've approached the design, so now you need to totally change your design. Right? So when appropriate, constructive criticism, ideas are awesome and necessary. And if you don't have a way to contribute them when they're appropriate, then you're not doing all you can to make what you're working on great. But definitely look for what's the right situation to share that information. The corollary of this is, if someone is sharing information with you, even if they didn't pick the perfect time to share it, then accept that information. It can be very hard, especially if you have found yourself getting wound up about a particular aspect of something because you believe in it so strongly. But if somebody else, even if they don't do it in a respectful way, but if they have a point and you can separate out anything that's not respectful and take the points that they give you, that will make you a better person. That puts you in that learning category for whatever it is, and now you're going to be able to move farther than you would have had you not been able to accept that criticism. And the last one, you need to want others to succeed. There are some times where folks get really convinced that they do have the right answer, to the point where it doesn't even look like they want someone else, if they have a point, to be able to make that point, right? And they might get into like this control aspect where they want to be a benevolent dictator in their minds. That's not good, right? It's not going to help them with teamwork, and they're also not going to be able to encourage folks to become better themselves. So this is don't falsely cheer. I know in the Army we have a false motivation is better than no motivation. But honestly, like, try to find ways that you can cheer for others to succeed. And when they do succeed, maybe even as small, if you can encourage them, then that gives them a lot of hope. I've certainly been on the receiving end of this many times, and every time it's meaningful, impactful, it's motivating. That question about, is the scope of something else that I can take on worthwhile? Maybe now that really helps me to increase the capacity of what I can do because I just have so much more motivation. But yeah, if somebody else does well, then be genuinely happy for them. Okay, so what I want to end with, and then hopefully you have some questions. You can challenge anything that I've put forward, and then I can learn and grow too. But I would challenge you to intently live life, right? With intent, not just kind of going along and looking for whatever opportunity is going to come find you, but go out and find the things that you find valuable. With interest, going back to the Dale Carnegie quote, to be interesting, be interested. If you are finding the things that you can do that you have an interest in, and then you're asking lots of questions in there, you're going to get a lot farther. Engagement, right? Don't just know that you don't know something and let that be okay if this is an area you're continuing to work on and learn what you don't know, engage, and respect. Always treat others with respect. Have others treat you with respect, care about them, and find ways that you can succeed with others and not outside of what everybody else can contribute together towards a community, a research group, an academic institution, or your workplace. Okay, all right, so that being said, questions?
Let us thank the speaker, please. So thank you very much for this simply perfect lecture for the leadership discovery event. Any questions?
was working earlier.
Can you guys hear me? That was a great lecture, Julianna. I really enjoyed it. I was just wondering about the term disappointment, right? Everybody faces disappointment in their lives.
Oh, yes.
So I usually use the famous quote, a finite amount of disappointment is acceptable as long as you don't give up infinite hope. I'm just curious, what's your take on how to deal with the disappointment in life in general?
Absolutely. So, yes, many things can happen that can cause you to have to check where you're at, how you're approaching something. And the best way that I found to deal with it is to be able to separate my personal worth as a person, as a human, and everyone else's personal worth with actions, right? So if someone has told me something based on their misconceptions about something and made decisions based on that, then can I find ways to at least take any value of truth? Did they have any truth in there that I can take internally, now reassess and find a better way forward than maybe what I thought was my way forward before? And also, is there something else that maybe interests me more? Right, so let's say I was trying to do research in a particular area and I'm just not finding the data that would help me actually come to meaningful conclusions. Can I turn, is there something else that would be worth turning to instead? So oftentimes disappointment for me might be a course correction. It also might be a self-check. And based on those things, let's say, here's a great example. I tried to do soccer my senior year of high school. I had never been in soccer before, but I was trying to put in an application for West Point and Air Force Academy, which didn't accept me, but I'm actually glad I went to West Point instead. So not too disappointing, right? I could just course correct and go to West Point, which is the United States Military Academy, not just the Air Force Academy. Because I had never done it, I was on a team of all high school ages, sophomore, freshman, and I was a senior, and I was also not knowledgeable, my body just didn't know how to do all these things the girls who had been playing soccer since they were little kids could just do without thinking about. So I was constantly disappointed in my inability to contribute to the team. I was also disappointed oftentimes that I wasn't learning faster, but I just had to take into account, hey, I started from here. Can I at least be happy that I'm learning a little bit more? By the time I got to college, I wasn't actually that bad now at playing pickup games of soccer. I could do a better job defending. I knew what a foul was, no sliding sideways, right? So it's tough, it's hard. And it takes a lot of, if you can, support networks who still believe in you, and then is this still worth it? Should I still do this? And if the answer is yes, then it's just, okay, take a little bit of humility and move forward.
Another question? Well, let us thank the speaker one more time.
And thank you for coming.